Hi, everybody. Today we will continue our portrait series, but in a different approach of what we did last week. This time, I will keep our portraits simple and flat. The concept is very straightforward. We'll create basic shapes and fill them in using just three colors, four at most, against a deep colored background. My goal is to leave them looking intentionally unfinished, as if they are works in progress. So, as usual, we will start with some quick sketches to plan out the compositions. We are going to use a 50 by 70 centimeters colored paper. It is 320 GSM, so it's very thick. But you can get similar results with a less dense paper, but no less than 220 GSM. Once again, we will paint with acrylics, but you can get the same results with any other paint. The only difference is going to be the texture and certainly the colors. For our first piece, I want to try out keeping all as flat as possible, adding little to no shadows or highlights, just enough to add subtle details. The process is simple. I mark the edges and fill them in with color. For the skin tone, I am maintaining the same flat style. But even when painting in a minimalistic way and intentionally leaving the composition mostly flat, I like to follow the natural flow of the shapes with my brush strokes. This small detail adds an interesting texture while keeping the overall look simple. The third color I'm incorporating is a golden hue for the coat's edges. While I wish I had chosen a paper with a lighter color for better contrast, I still think that the final result turned out well, and this is still one of my favorites from the batch. And here it is, our first composition of the day. So let's move on to our second portrait. Giving you more information than you need, I started painting around 10 p.m. and I was really tired, and it led to several mistakes. So here's a golden tip. If you're working on a piece that you want to keep, take the time to prepare properly. Gather all your materials, adjust your lights, and eliminate distractions, because this way you won't have to stop mid-process to grab tools or adjust your setup, which can disrupt your flow and impact the final result. The shape of the coat is a bit off, and when I tried to fix it, I simply made it worse. Unlike the first portrait, I added some facial features here, but they remain very subtle, almost invisible unless you look closely. That was intentional, as I wanted to keep the overall flat style consistent. In this piece, I made a poor sketch of the coat while trying to cover a small stain, and as a result, her neck ended up looking unnaturally long and awkward. And then I decided to add a bold red to fix the proportions. And unfortunately, since I was already tired, I didn't pay enough attention to the markings. So the end result was just a red block. And that's just one of those things. But despite these setbacks, this piece turned out to be my personal favorite from the whole batch. Okay, so moving on. For these portraits, I followed the same pattern as the previous ones. One color for the skin, one for the hair, and a third for a small detail. Here, it is the rose that she's holding. Like the first painting, I will leave the dress unpainted, just marking its shape with edges. I think this piece ended up a bit wider than intended, but overall, I still like it. Okay, moving on. This is my second favorite from the whole batch. Originally, my idea for the series was to create all portraits like this one, people seen from behind. Because this approach works well for beginners who may struggle with facial anatomy or expressions. So even without detailed facial features, you can still capture a strong portrait. While the painting remains mostly flat, looking closer, it is possible to notice a bit of texture, which adds visual interest to an otherwise simple and straightforward composition. The dress was painted in a deep black with hints of blue, and it still makes a good contrast with an already dark background. For our fifth and final piece for today, I initially planned to keep the face completely flat, but it didn't look quite right, so I decided to add faint, minimal facial features that appear to be fading. Everything in this portrait remains flat, with just a few added shadows for depth. To be honest, as a whole, this series isn't my favorite. Not because the concept is bad, but because not all pieces were well executed. Depending on your response, I will go back to this concept because I believe it is a good concept. But I still think it's worth it to show you what happens when starting too late in the evening, working while tired, or rushing to finish the compositions. However, the goal here is always to give you ideas and show you that even with limited time, you can create something interesting. So yes, I don't expect you to imitate what I'm doing here. Rather, I hope that it will inspire you to go create and make your own and start something that you might consider continuing afterwards. I know this style may not be for everyone, but I hope it inspires you to create your own pieces. The most important thing is to keep on practicing and experimenting. Here we have the finished pieces. Even if you never tried this technique before, I encourage you to give it a shot. You might surprise yourself. As always, keep on practicing and thank you for joining us.